So good morning, everyone. Delighted to be here. My name is Clara Raposo, and I've been asked, and I'm very proud, and I was very surprised to be asked to do this presentation, and delighted to be here. I'm currently the Dean and a Professor of Finance at ISEG, University of Lisbon, but I am also an ambassador of the SDG Alliance Portugal, of which I am very proud, and an ambassador for SDG number 4, quality education. And I took this challenge that was brought to me very recently to be the one who would present the progress report on the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, the report of the year 2022 that the United Nations produced and that was released maybe around June this year, okay? So the data that we have that I'll be talking about is very recent, and of course we're going through a very special moment in time. So what I'll do is I've planned this little talk following a sequence of topics. So just first of all, of course, we don't need to spend more time talking about the SDGs because we already had the previous presentations with the details of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. What I'll do is I'll show you the video, hopefully it will work, that the UN prepared a short summary video of the highlights of this report. Then I'll tell you a little bit about each of those Sustainable Development Goals, the evolution, what happened in the last couple of years, and why we are more concerned today perhaps than we were 3 years ago. I'll talk a little bit also about the case of Portugal, and then just some personal thoughts, because I think we need something that, you know, it's Happy Birthday UN today, so it's supposed to be a day, it's like a party at the same time. And we also know that the world is going through a lot of turmoil recently, so we were kind of trying to be on the right track to pursue those 17 Sustainable Development Goals. We were seeing some progress, so that's something that we should keep in mind, that the world has been moving forward, that we do have difficulties, but we saw some progress. But then with the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of the results that we are going to see are quite disappointing. And then the war in Ukraine again, as the world and many states in the world started trying to revive their economies. Then we have the war in Ukraine as well, and a big confusion in the macroeconomic environment, let's say. But we must not lose track of the big objectives, and let's just hope and make sure that the current extra complications that we're going through will be overpassed by us all. Okay. So let's try to move on. The 17 SDGs, here they are, just keep them in mind, because we're going to go through each and every one of them, the evolution, and we'll start with this video, if possible, the summary video of the UN on the Progress Report 2022. Just like
the
that.
world is in chaos.
That's
We
true.
absolutely, desperately need understanding.
We don't need one. Yes, the world is in chaos. You heard this gentleman say after watching that video, it's like a little punch in the stomach somehow when you look at that. And to be honest, when I read the report this year...
It's unarguable that humanity can't go on the way it is.
It's like my conscience, it's like Pinocchio. And
it appears to force the place between self-destruction and...
Yeah, you know, self-destruction is not a good idea. That's the thing on it. So when I read the report and when I was preparing these slides, it's like really, I mean, you feel so privileged to be where you are, to live how you live, to do the things you do on a daily basis, compared to what's happening everywhere in the world. I mean, to some people next to you, but far from us, there are people who really have horrible lives, okay? So, and especially in this report, it's quite a negative report because we see that there was some progress made over the last decade, let's say, these SDGs, and then suddenly with the COVID crisis, we saw quite a few of those indicators regressing, okay, going back to as they used to be in the old times, and also the quality of data and the collection of data regarding SDGs was also not as good as we used to have before the pandemic, because a lot of effort was put into finding the vaccines, transforming the health systems to fight that big pandemic, etc. So it's an especially negative report, I would say, but we can never lose hope of going back and putting ourselves back on track and making progress and move forward. So that's something that I think is the most important message that we should take from this report, although it's very negative, specifically because of that huge of the effect of the pandemic, and now also in 2022 the war in Ukraine. We need to do better, okay? So if it was time for action a few years ago, it's even more time for action now. So I think that's the main message. On the other hand, before I actually go through the 17 SDGs and their progress, I perhaps would like to just share a little extra information that I think is relevant from my personal point of view, and that has to do also with my recent visit to New York, to the United Nations and the Global Compact, where I had some interesting meetings, and one of them had to do with the Human Development Report and the evolution of the Human Development Index over the last decades. So, which is something that's a bit different from just looking at the item of, you know, GDP per capita or something like that. And you see how populations are evolving in the level of earnings per person in a country, etc. So there are different ways of measuring human progress and looking at other dimensions. So you can give me a lot of money if there's nothing for me to spend it on. That's not really a measure of my quality of life, let's say. Whereas if you look at other aspects of human development, then you might get a slightly different perspective. And some of the takeaways I took from that visit and from those from the evolution of the Human Development Index is that if you look at human development throughout the world, and it's been built and measured since 1990, it has increased immensely, okay, over the last decade. So it's like you know, it's grown immensely, even through the global financial crisis, etc. It's something that has grown, and that unfortunately over the last couple of years, for the first time, we saw a decrease in the level of human development caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. But overall, apart from that special event, we do see a lot of progress in terms of human development. So we are so often very negative about the progress that mankind has been making. But on the other hand, you know, despite the fact that so many people live in horrible conditions, still there is a lot of improvement compared to what we were doing, you know, a century ago in terms of humankind. The other aspects that I think we should keep in mind have to do with this other picture that I have here, which is political polarization. So this is a new fact that even the UN is collecting information on, which is that nowadays the percentage of people in the world who seem to be alienated from the political system and who seem to be untrusting of the political and institutions that we have is increasing, despite the fact that there is a strong majority that defends democracy. There is this polarization towards is this really the system that we should be living in or not? So we are not doing a good job in highlighting the good things that our systems are also doing. So communication these days is always very negative, and this report is actually an example of that. So let's not, lose track of the very important values that the UN also defends and stands for. The third element that I would like to mention, which is something that is quite surprising to me as well, is the peoples of the world nowadays have the most negative views of the world ever in history, according to documented information and surveys and data. So we are like the most negative generation ever, compared to World War II, for example, regarding what the world is doing, regarding the quality of life, etc. Although we are the generation with the best quality of life ever, we are the most negative. We are the generation with the most highest perceived sense of insecurity, for example. Although it is much safer to live where we live these days than it used to be a few years ago. So something is going on in terms of the way in which we communicate what we're doing and in the way in which we relate to each other. Perhaps this has to do with us being more aware of the problems and of the difficulties of the more global society, but it's something that we must keep in mind, that progress has been made, that more recently we have seen some extra problems that brought us back 4 years, for example, in terms of the index of poverty, etc. But, there's room for progress, and hopefully we'll be there. And the way in which we communicate, especially with younger generations, I think we need to rethink the way in which we do that, okay? So that's just a concern that I had. In terms of the highlights, okay, I'll go just very quickly through the 17, okay, trying to save some time. Regarding poverty, I think the biggest highlight is that it's for the first time since the SDGs exist, we see a derailing in the progress on ending extreme poverty. So for the first time, the index went down these 4 years, etc., but it's not something, the pointer is not really working. And I think we are, pretty aware of the fact that poverty has increased these last few years with the pandemic, with the effect of pandemic as well. And in what concerns SDG number 2, hunger, food security worldwide is a bigger concern these days than it was before the pandemic. 1 in 10 people in the world suffer from hunger, and 1 out of 3 people lack regular access to adequate food. So it's quite worrying, together with the war in Ukraine, and food shortage is a very important elements for us, okay? When you think about health and quality of life and well-being at all ages, of course the big focus of the report this year is the effect of COVID-19. More than 500 million people infected, more than 15 million deaths out of COVID, and overall also less care in fighting other diseases in many countries, including developed countries, because the focus was transferred to the COVID-19 fighting. And this is also a highlight of the report overall this year, which is mental health became really a global issue. A lot of anxiety and depression throughout the world, which goes together with what I was talking about before, on people being very negative about what we're doing, about the meaning of life and everything. So we need to find a way of engage ourselves with life again, which is not so easy. So and things like tuberculosis deaths increasing and malaria increasing for the first time in many decades. We see these elements progressing, and simultaneously we all know that it's not easy for the states to invest in health more than they're doing, given the current stress of trying to solve COVID, more indebtedness at some level, and then at some point you don't know where to choose from. 17 SDGs, how do you choose, where do you go first, etc. Setting priorities is very hard these days, but we'll make it. In what concerns quality education, of course we know that there's almost 150 million children who lost proper education during those 2 years with lockdowns, etc., with the pandemic. Inequality in education, of course, was more of an issue, even because, my children were at home with their computers and they did what they were supposed to do, etc. And they had, parents, if they were still young, who could help with that, in more developed economies, in more educated families, etc. Whereas people who live under worse conditions are, of course, more negatively affected by no schooling, no proper normal schooling, and so on. There is, on the other hand, there is a lot of investment these days in education and in improving conditions of schools, etc. But 25% of schools in the world, of primary schools in the world, still don't have electricity or basic sanitation. And when you look at this, it's like we don't know what this world is actually going through. Do we know our world? Yeah, this is the day to think about it. Yeah. Now, in terms of gender equality, there's a lot of inequality throughout the world, especially for young girls. It's shocking, right? That this still happens in so many parts of the world. There is still a lot of discrimination in many, many instances. So a lot is being done, but insufficient still for us to see exactly women and men being treated equally at school, at home, and in the workplace. So much more serious than you would have thought. Water, a very, very big concern, right? Clean water and sanitation, a very, very big concern, There's more than 700 million people these days who already live in countries with high and critical levels of water stress. So this is like North Africa, West Asia. These areas are already going through huge stress today on water supplies, and only 1/4 of the reporting countries have more than those 90% of transborder waters arrangements, etc. So it's something that the world needs to deal with very, very, very soon. So water would be, if I had to set priority, this would be one of my very top priorities. Yeah, very fundamental for the world. Energy. Actually, this is one of the SDGs in which we have seen a lot of progress in recent years, with a lot of electrification throughout the world, more renewable energies being produced, etc., etc., etc. Still, the level of development has slowed. Okay, so the development has slowed over the last few years, and when you think about consumption with renewable energies, it's less than 20% in the world. Okay. So a lot more investment in this needs to be done, and also we definitely need more solutions, more research and outcomes of that research for us to. Energy is of course going to be very crucial to power the whole economy, our consumption and our production, etc. So when looking at decent work and economic growth, SDG number 8, of course, we haven't felt this exactly like this in Portugal, but still, the levels of unemployment throughout the world are still higher now than they were before the pandemic, so we haven't recovered the same levels. And economic recovery, it's coming, but it's also not the same, according to our projections, before the war in Ukraine and after the war in Ukraine, where we have seen a more recessionary trend more recently again. So all these concerns that I'll try not to talk about for some other reasons right now. Okay, when you think about infrastructures, inclusive and sustainable industrialization, how to foster innovation, etc., we do see that global manufacturing has actually rebounded, but it's very unequal. So when you look at the less developed countries, recovery isn't there yet compared to what you see in more developed countries. So supply chains have changed, the world has changed with the pandemic as well. So the more recent numbers make us slightly more confused. And there's also this other effect that higher technology industries have been more resilient throughout the recent crisis. So more inequality in a way coming from these facts. And talking about inequality, there you go. When you look at when you compare countries, inequality between countries, etc., for the first time since these reports are done and since this is tracked, for the first time you see a rise in inequality between countries since the SDGs have been forecasted, etc. So, and this is due to asymmetric COVID-19 protection that you saw in more developed countries compared to others. So inequalities are these days more pronounced. It's like from 2017 to 2021, it's like the first generation that faces this increased inequality in the world, ours, okay? So migrants, I mean, we've seen this horrible numbers, right? And these global refugee numbers, right? The highest ever this year. Also, together with these, the workers' share in national income throughout the world overall is eroding, actually. Another concern, right? On the way in which labor is being valued or not. So, yeah. Okay? Smart cities, quality of life in cities, making cities more inclusive, safe, resilient, sustainable, etc. A good thing is that the number of countries that have their local disaster risk plans, etc., and strategies, that the number of countries who do it has doubled, so numbers are increasing. More cities in the world are having plans and developing those plans, etc. Still, I mean, they have 1 billion slum dwellers. Big concern with solid waste in cities, okay, and management of solid waste, and is something that we should keep in mind. And of course, 99% of the world's urban areas are highly polluted. But at least now we have good coverage and measurement of this pollution, so it's something that we should be following more closely. Yeah, there's a lot of work to do, right? The agenda is not shortening, right? Is it? Number 12, sustainable consumption and production patterns. I mean, a lot has been already said today on these matters, but the truth is that our reliance on natural resources is actually increasing, right? It rose 65% globally from the year 2000 until 2019, yeah? So we are using more and more the resources of the planet. So either we produce and consume in very different ways, or we find a way of powering the way in which we live differently, or we'll be in trouble. So any change that we can make on our own personal lives and anything we can influence to invert this trend is actually very welcome, yeah? And it must be, you know, the focus in any discussion you're part of, okay? 13, of course, 13, yeah, climate action, right? It's not even an SDG, it's like, you know, something that encompasses everything that we're doing. It's just, you know, the urgency, it's the one where, you know, like this thing, climate change is code red warning, yes, because without this you won't have a home, right? And you don't, if this isn't sorted, you don't need to worry about any of the other SDGs or anything else that your children will be doing in the future. So, and we know what's happened, sea level rising, droughts estimated to displace 700 million people by 2030, yeah. Big catastrophic nature disasters happening, etc. And the truth is that energy-related carbon dioxide emissions increased 6% in 2021 still, okay? So the highest level ever of emissions in the planet was last year, okay? So we need to make some changes in climate finance. Of course, it's not enough, but there are some good news on that field as well. There is more awareness, right? There are quite a few investors in the world that are aware that they should be sending their investments to more environmentally friendly environments, right? The big problem we have overall is really, you know, setting the priorities, because you care about the environment, you care about the social aspects, you care about government aspects, you care about all these things, and then you need to really at some point choose what's the big priority now, because it's all interrelated, right? Like how we heard before, okay? Now, the ocean, of course, endangered, as we know. Increasing acidification is actually worrisome, because the ocean is no longer performing as it should its role of moderating climate change, right? Plastic pollution, etc. So this is the other area of strong investment that needs to be made throughout the world, and it can't be something that it's done by one country, it's something that has to be coordinated. That's why entities like the United Nations are really the big final hope of having some influence in bringing sense to the minds of the most important leaders that we have. In terms of life on land, okay, again 10 million hectares of forest destroyed every year, yeah. Most of it due to agricultural expansion, and biodiversity has been largely neglected in the COVID-19 recovery spending, as we know, because the priority at the time was really the vaccines and saving people and hospitals, all those basics, so something to worry about. Okay? Now, in what concerns SDG number 16, global peace, etc., well, a quarter of the global population still lives in conflict-affected countries. This is the year in the world right now, today, right? This is the moment in the world with the largest number of conflicts ever. Yeah? So should I finish? No, I'm okay with time. Okay, so, and there's that people being forcibly displaced for different reasons throughout the world, so I think we got the picture, right? Yeah. And final, 17, we just want this to end, right? we just want this to end. 17, partnerships for the goals, you know, extremely important that everyone is really brought together to go ahead with the implementation of these goals, with reaching these goals. When you look at the current numbers, although official development assistance actually increased substantially in 2021, largely due to the COVID-19 fight, etc., and foreign direct investment and remittances, etc. All these numbers increased, yeah. And of course, the other positive thing, which was the only positive thing in the video that we saw before, was internet coverage. Okay, it's like if you think about it, yeah. It has increased throughout the world. The thing is that even data collection, etc., for the SDGs and that effort. We lost a little bit of focus over the last couple of years, and I say this as well at university, at school, right? I didn't have the time to go through all the details of my SDGs over the last couple of years because I was doing lots of other things, and I think this has happened, right? So we need to get back on track on this, to get the numbers and to get evidence. And of course, we know that throughout the world there is a lot of debt, okay? From families, from states, from all sorts of things. So, this means that we need to find a nice way of calmly fighting strongly what's most urgent, I would say. So, not easy times ahead of us, right? So, on a more positive note, okay? On a more positive note, when you look at the numbers from Portugal, okay, or the 17 SDGs for Portugal, I'm not going to bother you with the details, etc., but there is also tracking. If you go to this site, which I'm not showing you now, it's quite interactive. These dashboards, SDG index, you go to the SDG index if you want to Google that. SDG index, and you can search by country, and you look at Portugal, for example. You can actually find a lot of detail, and then when you click on each of our SDGs, you can see what has increased, what has decreased. It has sub-items where you can see what's really measured, etc. And we actually rank 20 out of 163 countries that I traced, yeah, which is, you know, not bad. Our score, this 79.22, has increased steadily all these years, okay? So the numbers, the way it can be, you know, the data, and we are always very negative, but the truth is we don't perform badly on this at all. And when you think about, you know, the rest of the world, let's bring a little bit of Portugal pride into this, and let's just make sure that it keeps moving up until it's 100, right? That's the objective. And we actually can see in which areas we are performing better or worse, etc. So, when you look at its energy, clean and affordable energy, we are performing very green, very well. Let's see what happens with the energy crisis right now. But you know, we are doing much better than most countries in the world in this area. And we do have some issues on other areas like life on water, on responsible production and consumption, and even on hunger, which has to do a lot, for example, even with obesity of children, things like that, you know. When you go through the details and you check the sub-items, you understand a bit better how these things are measured, Yeah. So, and it's something that we all can do, but it's not such a bad panorama, let's say. So there's hope. The concern we have is whether our economies will be in a world in conflict, right? Whether it's possible for the European Union, for example, to be able to implement its green agenda and all those positive objectives, right? If there was a part of the world where we saw some positive leadership in this direction, both in the digital transition and in the green transition, it's been, you know, the European Union trying to move these conversation and actions forward, and then first it's the pandemic, and then there's a lot of, you know, indebtedness to deal with the pandemic, and then suddenly this war in Ukraine is definitely not helping. So let's hope that a proper solution comes soon, and with diplomacy, etc., it's possible to move forward again. Okay? On a more personal note and positive note, and I see colleagues here from other universities like Coimbra, my colleagues from ISEG, there, my former school as well, I see them there, and I know how much work they all do in this area. Just on a more positive note, I would say that the new generations, right, which are to be treated just like any of us, not like, oh, the perfect, etc. No, young, old, etc., you know, ready for sacrifice as well. So that this is a new word that we should be introducing perhaps more often at home when we talk to our children. It's not them against us. Oh, like sometimes say, your generation destroyed the planet. Oh, come on, we're all here, right? No. We are all going to save this thing again. So, and they need to understand the sacrifice that they also need to make, that we all need to make together to recover. Just to give you a little example of the things that universities are doing, okay? So I'll give you some examples of mine. So for example, in my school, we created what we call the Champions for the SDGs to generate awareness in 2018. We developed this sustainability strategy and policy with the agenda for 2030. We have a chief sustainability officer. We defined our priority SDGs, although we measure all of them, our progress on all of them. We have an action plan for every 2 years, and we defined our strategic priority axis on the things that are core to our activity: education, research, our campus, relation with the community, and transparency. So just to give you an idea, I'm not going to talk about that, but just so you understand, I'm just giving an example of one school of economics and management, a business school if you want, right? Just so you know, this is just, you know, a sample per SDG of the new contributions that were introduced in the course units on all the undergraduate students, for the masters, etc., and that we measure, that the professors are aware that, I mean, what are you teaching regarding this? How is what you do related to these sustainable development goals? How does that work? And the same thing when you look at the master's thesis, the master's works, final works, contributions of our students, right? So this is like the number of theses that you can, in which you see that the sustainable goals are present, and in which areas, in which of the SDGs. And then as people are more and more aware of this, then they discuss the topics more properly and they just take it to the next level. So there is a lot of interest in our universities, in the faculty, in the professors, in the students, etc. And it's something that, again, is not exclusive to my school. It's something that is shared in many, many very, very good schools here in Portugal, okay? And also we introduce a lot of innovation in our programs, right? In all the course units, specific online programs for our school, for whoever wants to share. Our Masters in Management fully focused on the Sustainable Development Goals. Our partnership with Columbia Business School has this new leaders agenda for CEO type of leaders that we have that, you know, who study this with us, etc. So there is a lot of work on that, and also on something that, because I'm a finance professor, of course, I think is very important, which is financing this transformation of businesses, making it profitable, like we just heard, right? So, just to give you an idea, the same happens in what concerns research, right? We don't just contribute to, you know, the normal economic analysis with our sixth conjuntura that every month my school produces, following what's happening in the economy, etc., and the big trends, but also in what projects that are very much related to each of the SDGs, and we can also trace our publications, etc., how they are related to the different sustainable development goals, and then this makes everyone think better about what they're doing. Are we doing it in a proper way or not? Should we be more policy-oriented at some point, etc.? okay? So I'm talking about the campus, and then in the end, this is something that to me, you know, is like the grand finale, the best way of thinking about things. This is all about people in the end. And when we put our focus on the planet, etc., that we need to save the planet, is that it's not just because we like the trees and the birds and the sea and the fish and all the other animals and the mountains and all that. It's because it's our home. And so, unless these people with whom we share this room this morning, unless we feel something, unless I care about you, right, about people I don't know, unless we care about each other, that's the crucial thing. So that's something that has to be taught at some point. And sometimes it's insufficiently taught at home, caring about one another and caring about everyone. So in our schools, we're doing a lot of that. From day one, you know, when they arrive and we all sit on the floor and we discuss what we're doing and what we're doing, until they leave and you see, you know, people, you know, when they really hug, they really hug. When they really discuss things, they really do so. So let's just put the focus on enlarging this big hug and make it work. Okay, the future, never give up. Let's just, you know, make it happen. I'm done. Thank you for the invitation.